welcome to the Hiller Aviation Museum, and thank you so much for coming out on a rainy day. But what better way to spend a rainy day than at a museum, right? So thank you all for coming out. We have a wonderful presentation for you today. Very excited about this. And before I do that, I want to do a couple of housekeeping things. First, if everybody would turn off their cell phones or put on silent, vibrate, whatever, please go ahead and do that. And then I'd also like to welcome a couple of groups that are with us today. First, we have the Southwest Council of Air Shows. Right here in the front row, give a wave, everybody. Now, if you don't know what Southwest Council of Air Shows is, all those air shows that you enjoy going to and watching the aerobatics and airplanes go flippity-flop and so forth, a lot of the guys are sitting right here in this, or the producers of those shows are here with us today. So it's a conference that they have once a year, and they having it at the museum this year. And then I'd also like to welcome our scouts in the back. We have Boy Scouts getting their merit badges today on both sides. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to change the intro a little bit than doing a normal intro where you read off how someone is, all the great accomplishments they've done, because our presenter today certainly warrants that. But I have a better story. And basically the story starts about, I think it was 2007, I think it was 2005. I'm getting old. I was doing the air boss for the Travis Air Show. And what the air boss is kind of like the conductor of an air show. It's the one that tells the airplanes when to take off and land, and safety and that type of thing. So I was air bossing the Travis Air Show, and we were having coffee in the C5A, which is they had set up with coffee and donuts in the C5A. Best Starbucks I've ever been to. That's really cool. And I see Sagar walking by, and he's being escorted by a public affairs officer. And he kind of waves as he went by, and I waved as he went by. And then they start talking to each other. And this is on Friday, what they call the rehearsal show, before the public's allowed to come in. They stop, they come back, and she says, this guy says he knows you. I hate being approached like that, like, oh, I don't know about that. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He says, well, he's out here, he doesn't have the proper credentials. I don't know how he got on the field. But he's not supposed to be here, but he says he knows you. And I said, well, yeah, I do know him. He's shot for our show, the Vertical Challenge show here at the museum for a number of years. And they said, well, okay, but he's got to go. So off they go, start scurrying away. And then they stop. I see him talking to her again. She turns around, they come back. She says, okay, look, if you'll be responsible for him, then he can stay. And that was a mistake. So I said, oh, sure, like I don't have any other responsibilities other than running the air show. Okay, I'll be responsible for a photographer. So, okay, let him stay. So thank you, he gets to stay and everything was fine. So stay by me, Sagar, stay by me. So we go over and we get to the air boss stand. And it was a cool thing because he takes cool pictures, kind of like this. That's me with the Thunderbirds in the background and a C5 landing and my XO Jimmy standing there. So some cool pictures. Well, that's the last I saw him. And I didn't think about it. I'm off doing my duties, so I didn't think about it anymore. So about 2 weeks after the show, I got this shot in the mail. And it's a beautiful shot of when the Hiller Museum had a DC-3. And it's this beautiful shot of the DC-3 with the C5A, both cargo type airplanes back, one World War II, current cargo type plane. What a cool shot. Then I started thinking to myself, how did he get this shot? This is before drones were really cool and you could fly drones around, right? I know he didn't have a helicopter. So I called him and I said, Sagar, how did you get that shot? Because it's so cool. He says, oh, I was up in the control tower. I said, now think about that. How does a guy with no ID, no passes, get up into a highly secure control tower out on their catwalk and then take pictures of the entire base? Well, that kind of sums up our presenter today because he does stuff like that. But he's also the epitome of the answer is no unless you ask, and if they say no, then you ask again. And you keep asking until you get the right answer. And he's done some amazing things. As he'll say, at one time he was the highest flying Indian in the world because he flew in a U-2. And he also has flown in a B-52. He has flown in a T-38, my favorite airplane. He has flown F-15, and the list goes on. And all of this is a civilian, but it's because he asked. So anyway, let's go ahead, let's get this party rolling, and please welcome up Sagar.
Hey guys, wow, I didn't expect so many people to show up for this thing. Well, thank you, Willie, and thank you very much everyone for coming out on this nice and wet day, and especially to, the people I've tormented and harassed for many years, supporting me so I can actually get these pictures. And as a photojournalist, we have to get really creative in order to get the shots. Sometimes the logic doesn't make sense up front, but hopefully the results speak for themselves at the end. And like Willie said, what's the absolute worst thing someone can say to you? No. And that's been my mantra for over 20 years. I started as a kid at Santa Clara University. I grew up here in Sunnyvale, and I was an engineer by profession. I'm still a practicing engineer, and I still find a way to make my passion for aviation my hobby. And the story actually starts at Moffett Field. Some of you, I'm hoping most of you live in the Bay Area, you know that there's this amazing airfield about 20 miles south of here. And it used to be a formal naval base. And ever since I was about knee-high, as young as a lot of you guys in the audience, my dad used to take me to every air show at Moffett Field. And I can honestly say air shows ruined me. A few of the people here probably know exactly what I mean. But, I would go to every air show at Moffett and try my best to do whatever I can, learn about airplanes, talk about airplanes, anything airplane related, I was all about. But if you had told me 20 years ago that this kid here, biggest air show airplane fan, I had the posters in the room, the models hanging, and, to me, I didn't know that there was a pilot in there. It was just a jet that made a lot of noise, or a really cool little propeller plane with smoke trying to make circles in the sky, would end up flying some of the most unique and amazing Air Force aircraft in the world. I wouldn't have believed it, I still don't believe I get a chance to do this kind of stuff. But, at the end of the day, I figured out a way, to be honest, that got a chance for me to cross that red line and be on the other side of the ropes and get close and get to know many of you guys in the air show community. And, I got a few photos along the way that didn't suck. And, as a photojournalist, it's great to be able to do that, but, one of the things is, I don't want to tell people that you can scam your way onto something. I know the audience knows a little bit what I'm talking about. You have a ton of people with cameras that come through and say, hey, I'm going to make you famous. I'm going to put you on the cover of a magazine. Well, I actually follow through on that. Each of these photos and magazine covers are ones that I've taken of a lot of performers that I've had the opportunity to get to know, and a lot of folks in our military, and shed light on the people that actually fly the plane. Because as I grew up, I realized there's a person, a man or a girl, in that cockpit that works really hard in order to provide us entertainment. And it's a dangerous job, and to be able to tell their story and give them a little bit of credit, that warms my heart. But, well, why do they choose me to do these things? Because you can't, like Willie said, you have to be able to have the guts to ask. And if you forget anything in this presentation, remember only one thing: it never hurts to ask. Worst thing they're going to do is say no to you. And sometimes it's going to be a lot of no's, but if you're persistent, you can figure out a way to, make it happen if you really want it. And I work full-time as an engineer. I got a degree in computer engineering, so I'm not really anything aviation by trade, except I've got a passion. And I figured out that, being unique, being different was the way to go about doing it. You don't want to be like everyone else. You want to be unique, you want to be yourself. And I have the gift of gab, so you get to hear a lot of me talking for the next 45 minutes. But what I realized was I love telling a story. I'm a narrator, I'm an orator, I read Tom Clancy, I like that little bit of drama, and today I'm actually going to read to you guys a story of what it was like flying the B-2 stealth bomber. But I've got, from a business standpoint, it's called a brand, Horizontal Rain, that's me, and what I've got is kind of hard to see, but I've got a Facebook page, a blog page, and a YouTube page, in addition to Pinterest, Twitter, whatever the kids are doing nowadays. And you know, slowly I realized that people like reading about this stuff. People like seeing these exciting pictures and misadventures, because sometimes they would get a little interesting. And so, in addition to the traditional print journalism that I was able to offer, I also came back with the power of social media. And if you guys will indulge me just for 1 second, I'm going to do what, you know, all the kids are doing and take a selfie. Everyone can't wait. That'll get posted later on. But the really cool thing was that that's a different way to reach and connect with people. You know, I grew up, again, reading magazines, and I'd go to Barnes & Nobles and rush every month, figure out what I wanted to see, and then all of a sudden wait 3-4 weeks and read the same magazine over and over again. But luckily with the power of social media, you're able to instantaneously interact with people all over the world. And I was able to help spread the message that, you know, there's something going on, whatever that message would be, to a broader and more diverse audience. So how do you actually get to fly a stealth bomber? Well, relationships. Realistically, it was just relationship building. Years and years and years. To give you an idea, back in 2009, I first went to Whiteman Air Force Base to do a story on the B-2, and I got a chance to do an air-to-air. What that means for the kids in the audience is I'm flying in one airplane with my camera, and then the B-2's right next to me. Like, as far away as we are, there's a B-2 right off your wing. And so I've got my camera, I'm taking pictures, everything's going great. We land, and all of a sudden we're at the bar and having drinks, and there's the officers club, and you know, this is going on, that's going on. Everyone's like, look, show me the pictures, show me the pictures. Oh my God, I can't believe you guys did that. It's so amazing. And in walks then the OG. He's the second in command, I believe, of the base. And he's like, his name was Thomas Boussier, and at the time he was just a colonel. And he's like, his call sign is Broad. I'll let you figure out that one. So he's like, Sagar, show me these pictures. And you know, I start showing, he's like, this is absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Let me shake your hand for helping spread our message out to the people. And I'm like, well, I just took pictures. But we kept in touch, and all of a sudden, you know, a few years later, somehow Bra ended up being the commander of the 509th, which is the bomb wing that all the stealth bombers fly under. And he invites me to his change of command ceremony. I graciously decline because, you know, I've got a very busy schedule. Not every general, you can't just show up for every general whenever they beckon. So in March 18th, 2013, Bra and I end up having this conversation. It was the 20th anniversary of the B-2. It's been operational for 20 years. And he wanted to do something special, do an amazing photo shoot and get the message out there. So I was like, I'll check my schedule, I'll let you know, which of course was a yes, absolutely everything gets cleared off. But the other important thing that happened in 2013, a lot of my friends over here know, sequestration hit. What that meant was a lot of the Air Force assets and military assets in general were grounded. They were doing only a certain amount of activities within their budget, and flying Sagar around was not one of them. So we waited, and then unfortunately for me, it's all about relationship building, but late 2013, a new general showed up on the scene of the 509th, General Van Herk. I didn't want to have to redo all this building and approvals and all over again, and lucky for me, Bra put in a good word for me, told the general, he's like, hey, Sagar's a good guy, we've got this request, we really want him to work on it, can you please help him out as well? I got grandfathered in. And then luckily, in January 29th, it got approved. So just under a year later, they actually approved it. And they were like, what do you want to do? I'm like, me? I want to fly the B-2. They're like, no, you can't fly the B-2. I'm like, why not? They're like, well, you know, you're not qualified, and you know, it's top secret aircraft, can't fly the B-2. I'm like, but you let him fly. Well, why can't I fly it? Well, let me get back to you. And let me get back to you meant that he had to ask his boss, the commander of the 8th Air Force, who's a 2-star. He's like, well, let me see. Let me ask my boss. So he asked his boss, General Wilson, who's a 3-star, who's got a lot better things to do. And the guy's like, I don't know. It's up to you, Scott. You take care of this. And Scott's like, I really don't know. If, you know, Glenn, if you think this is a good idea, you know, whatever, just let the kid fly. And I'm sure there was like a secret Skype chat group going on or something where all these generals get together and do whatever it is generals do. But next thing I knew, 7 stars had said yes inadvertently. And somehow I got a chance to get approved to fly the B-2. So April 28th was my flight. That was the day that I returned back to Whiteman Air Force Base, Knob Noster, Missouri, middle of America. It's the home of all the active B-2 squadron, or B-2 aircraft. There are 21 B-2s that were made. One unfortunately did crash in Guam. That left 20. One of them is flying at Edwards Air Force Base in California as a test article. So each of the rest of the B-2s actually live in the middle of America. And the most amazing part about the middle of America, I was like, wow, why would you put it in the absolute middle of nowhere? Turns out the reason was simple. It was the longest a nuclear missile would have to travel in order to attack the B-2. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So one of the interesting things is they actually have nukes at this base. I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I was never in the military and I didn't sign any paperwork. But I'm sure you can Wikipedia that. It's the only aircraft base where the air asset and the nukes are on the same base. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And each aircraft, air vehicle, as they call them, has its own dock, which is, each of these little doors is for one B-2. And before I go to the next slide, you guys actually see the B-2 in the picture? I'll help you out. It's stealthy. You can even see it when it's in front of you. So the 509th Bomb Wing has an amazing legacy. It was actually originally in World War II the 509th Composite Group. And the 509th Composite Group had 2 claims to fame, or however you want to see it. It was the B-29 that actually dropped 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in doing so, the emblem of the 509th Bomb Wing, actually, has 2 little atomic bomb clouds to honor its legacy as the only active squadron to ever have dropped a nuclear bomb. There's 2 bomb wings under the 509th. The 13th Bomb Wing, known as the Grim Reapers, their call sign is Death. We have the 393rd Bomb Wing, the Tigers, and their call sign is, I'm sorry, I already screwed up. Their call sign is Death, and the other call sign is Reaper. And what's unique is there's also the 131st Bomb Wing, the only Air National Guard unit in the B-2 inventory. So they're reservists who fly not a little bit more than 1 weekend a month, but you know, they work hard and they get a chance to be reservists and still serve their community. There's also the 394th Combat Training Squadron, and what these B-2 pilots use is they use these aircraft to maintain proficiency. For those that don't know, the B-2 is actually the most expensive aircraft ever built. $2.2 billion for 20 aircraft. 21 were issued at the time. So it also has a fun fact that it's actually the most expensive aircraft per hour to fly, just under $200,000 an hour. So as a private pilot, you know, when I complain about my little Piper Cherokee costing about $100 and some an hour, well, $200,000 makes it really easy to, you know, chalk it up. So some of you have been very lucky to see that, you know, we've been lucky to see a B-2 at an air show. You know, a lot of the air show fans again, and I mean, I've actually seen a B-2 fly. Yeah, awesome. It's an amazing sight. I still remember the first time I saw it was at Fleet Week in San Francisco, and it was just orbiting, doing lazy orbits over Berkeley, and like the hairs were standing up like they are right now. I'm just like, what is that thing? You know, a lot of people when it was being developed thought it was a UFO, but then when you see it silently fly by and you hear death on the radio, you're like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And then you get a chance to go ahead and see it up close, and you're like, whoa, that's really cool. So the stealth is a fancy word. It means a lot of things to a lot of people, and for this particular aircraft, it's a combination of many things. It's radar absorbent material, and I'll go into the size specifications a little later, but to kind of give you an idea, it's got the same wingspan as a 747. Really, really big, and it's about only a third of the size. So when you're looking at it on radar, what you actually see, the radar control sees what's called a RCS, radar cross-section, the same size as a little sparrow hawk. So no one ever knows that it's coming, which is one of its key assets. Because it doesn't fly high, it doesn't fly fast, but by golly, it gets where it needs to do, does its job, and comes home. And the other way it implements stealth is it actually puts the engines inside the aircraft. There's an air scoop at the top, and it sucks in air, provides the engines, heat goes out the back, and so you don't have heat-seeking missiles attacking it. What they decide, they're like, hey, you know, we're gonna steal some tiles from the space shuttle's belly, put them on top, and run the heat over it and cool it down. So now the heat signature has been lessened. So it uses a whole bunch of different things. But, you know, there was time to get to work, and you can't just sit there jaw dropped and taking pictures of airplanes all day, because, you know, that's forbidden. So I have to go first, in order to fly, you have to go through a series of hoops before you can get on base. I have to get medically cleared. One of the good things that I've got is what they call the golden card. I've got a high altitude chamber card where I've done special training with the Air Force to be able to say, hey, I recognize what symptoms of hypoxia, lack of oxygen. I've got, as Willie said, a background where, you know, I've been inside aircraft. I'm very familiar with them. And proud to say I'm a private pilot myself. So the flight doc was like, hey, no problem, Sagar. You look like a healthy guy. I've got your FAA medical. We did some basic testing here, and unrestricted. You're clear to fly both the T-38 and B-2. Then came the not so fun part of the day. They measure you and poke you and prod you, and what's going on here on the left is I'm actually being measured to see if I can sit inside the cockpit. I'm 6 feet tall when I'm not slouching, and I barely can fit in there with my helmet and have the canopy close on me in a T-38. And what they do right here is they measure to see if the length from your hip to your knee is too long, so that if you were to have to eject out of the aircraft, unfortunately, your legs don't get chopped off. Bad visual, but you know, they want to make sure that you're set up for success if you were to eject. You get fitted for a helmet, oxygen mask, G-suits, and really don't know what's going on over there, but I think I had to buy the girl dinner or something. Then it came time to the paperwork and PowerPoint death, as you guys are observing right now. We talked about ejection seats. The T-38 and B-2 have two different styles of ejection seats. The T-38's ejection seat is not what they call a 0-0. What 0-0 means that if you're on the ground at 0 altitude, not moving at all at 0 airspeed, you could pull those yellow handles, eject out of the airplane, and the parachute would safely open and give you enough distance and space to land. The T-38, unfortunately, you have to be going at least 50 knots in order to eject safely out of that aircraft. You can still be on the ground, but when you're taking off, you're rolling, and you're below 50 knots, something goes wrong, hopefully you can slow the aircraft down. And the other thing that they teach you is how to egress out of the aircraft, how to get out of the aircraft on the ground. So we go ahead, and this is the mock trainer for the T-38. We go ahead and we walk through every possible scenario. Because again, at the end of the day, anything could go wrong. And it has, unfortunately, for some people. But as I mentioned, you talk, you rehearse, you figure it out, and eventually it gets drilled into you. You go through all the procedures. What happens if the ejection seat doesn't work? How do you get out of the aircraft? Will you release and pull yourself out, manually bail out? Where's the handles? Where's the tool? And we go through. We had to do the exact same thing for the B-2 itself. This is the trainer for the B-2, and as you can see, it's not fancy, but this is as close to what I can take inside the aircraft and show you guys about the size and spacing of what it's like inside a B-2. For some odd reason, they wouldn't let me take pictures inside the B-2. Something about classified security and all that stuff. But again, they let me fly it, so I'm still grateful. And as you can see, anything yellow helps you eject out of the aircraft. And there's another option at the top. There's two doors that would eject off. And I will happily say that the one time that they had to use it in Guam, when the first B-2 crashed, both pilots did survive. Then came my not so fun part of the day, which was the parachute training. So even after you eject, you gotta be able to know how to use the parachute. What happens if the parachute doesn't open? What happens if a line is caught over the parachute? How do you actually land without breaking your ankles? And what happens if you actually get caught in a tree? There's not a lot of trees in Knob Noster, I think, but you know, I think I had better luck riding a cow or landing on it. Then we had a chance to go, had a little bit of downtime, and over the phone, they're like, hey, Sagar, do you want to have an opportunity to interact with some of Whiteman's finest? Get a chance to really get to know them one-on-one at a real personal level. I absolutely love our airmen. Anything I can, take their photo. Well, Boris was one of the guys I had a chance to interact with, and I can say he's a really good listener. I think he's got some therapy issues he needs to work out, but we had a good time. And then it was time to actually get ready. So what I'm going to do is read, if that's okay with you guys, my blog at horizontalmarine.com. The $2.2 billion B-2 Spirit, which carried both nuclear and conventional payloads, plays a vital role in establishing air supremacy. And on April 28, 2014, I got a chance to sit right seat as mission commander in the world's most technologically advanced bomber and fly along on a simulated nuclear strike and wage war against our enemies. Even with no real munitions on board during my flight, I would soon gain an up-close and personal appreciation for the power and capability of the aircraft. While only a fictional strike was being executed, members of the 509th always followed the motto, train like you fight, fight like you train. That day, 3 B-2 Spirits, flown by members of the 393rd Bomb Squadron, 13th Bomb Squadron, and reservists from the 131st Bomb Wing, were to participate in a multi-ship, multi-story simulated attack on a foreign country during War Week and bring down their air defense system. Other aircraft assets from different bases would also be participating to take out these threats. That day, we were going to nuke St. Louis and Des Moines, Iowa. In the early hours at Whiteman Air Force Base, maintainers were busy prepping for 3 B-2s for their day of flying. Air crews were busy putting final touches on their flight plans and coordinating last-minute operations with issues. We would then be the second set of ships in a 3-ship sortie, where the first 3 planes would take off at 11:30 and return at 16:30 for a 5-hour sortie. Then with the engines running, the B-2s would stop on the hard stands, the new air crew would hot swap, and then take off on the next mission, a process called ERCing, Engine Running Crew Change. Our sortie with Death 2-1, Death 2-2, and my aircraft, Death 2-3, would fly 3.0 hours and return for one last hot swap, where the next crew would finally shut down and fly their 3-hour sortie at 23:30. For those in the audience, that's military time. I always sound cooler when I say that. My pilot Shredder, a B-2 instructor pilot with the 393rd, and I met at 11 o'clock for our 16:30 takeoff. Shredder and I walked to the security gate just outside the 393rd Bomb Wing, and the security on this base is beyond impressive. Rightfully so, because they're the sole responsibility of the entire US Air Force stealth bomber fleet. I was already stripped of my cell phone, any recording devices, and all my camera equipment before we got to the first checkpoint. Several ID checks, verbal authorizations, and even, well, I can't get into that one, but they did mention several times use of deadly force authorized. I took it very seriously. Then we got to the bomb squadron building, and even after another set of security checks, we got to the final checkpoint where there was a cipher lock, a vault lock, and we got into the inner sanctum, the top secret mission planning room. There, Shredder and I briefed our sortie. We would do an ERC and follow Death 2-1 for a staggered formation takeoff from Whiteman Air Force Base, which is right here. And then we would head southwest down to refueling track 110 Echo and rendezvous with Hoist 90, a KC-10 refueling tanker from Joint Reserve Base McGuire, and take on 15,000 pounds of fuel. Then we would go ahead and start our bombing run after we turned here. So anything red is the bombing run, and the refueling track, for those who are curious, is right here. We would take on 1,500 pounds of fuel and drop 16 conventional JDAMs, reset our software for a tactical nuke mission, and take out our targets with B-83 nuclear bombs, and then finally return to Whiteman, ERC with the next crew. We briefed our tactical objectives and mission objectives, and we wanted a safe sortie with actual time on target, plus or minus 60 seconds, and return to base within 60 seconds as well. Our brief was over at 12:30, and we had about 30 minutes to go grab our food for the flight, dinner in my case. While the B-2 runs on JP-8, air crews run on BX Spirit. And my choice, Taco Bell. 2 bean burritos, no onions. With long-range flights in the B-2 lasting well over 30 hours, they actually fly non-stop from over here to the Middle East and back. So air crews, the second most useful thing that they have in the aircraft is the microwave. The first most useful is a cot that they actually purchased from Walmart, which fits right between the seats behind you. You can lay out. The B-2 only has 2 seats. We then headed back to the 393rd at 1300, and even though only 30 minutes had passed, our mission was already in jeopardy of being canceled. The B-2 we were scheduled to fly in was already having mechanical difficulties. And after a closed-door discussion, and Chad me nervously pacing outdoors, I was not allowed to be a part of it, they decided we'd actually be able to be allowed to jump in the backup aircraft, which was the B-2 the Spirit of Mississippi, but we would have to do a cold start and get the aircraft running, and if we could do it in time, we would be allowed to join the formation and continue the mission. Top 3 would start making calls while Shredder and I left to life support to get our gear and start stepping to the aircraft. We grabbed our helmet bags and our ACES 2 harness from life support, and the crew van was already waiting to take us to the dock where AB6 was. As we left life support, we got a call and picked up Dexter, the second B-2 pilot that would help run through the checklist and get us airborne. But as we approached the dock, the doors were closed and no maintainers were in sight. Not a good sign. Usually it takes the crew chiefs about 3 hours to fully prep a B-2 before it can get airworthy. We were looking to launch in less than 1 hour. A few minutes later, the crew chiefs arrived and leapt into action. We quickly briefed with the maintainers and reviewed the known issues. Dexter leapt into the cockpit to start the pre-flight, and just like every other plane, Shredder and I did a walk around of the Spirit of Mississippi. We kicked the tires, inspected the bomb bays, consulted with the crew chiefs for a go, no-go. But first I had to take a picture of us next to the bomb bay doors, because, well, no one else was going to do it, so I had to. I grabbed my helmet bag and Taco Bell dinner and followed Shredder into the cockpit. Shredder and Dexter continued the checklist, and I sat in the back and watched. The B-2 only had 2 seats, no jump seat, so the only other place other than the ground to sit was on the toilet. The world's most expensive toilet, I found out later. As the mission pilots finished their checklist and just in time, Dexter hopped out of the mission commander seat and I jumped in the right seat. He helped me connect my harness to the ejection seat, connect the comm cords, hook up to the oxygen system, and help me familiarize myself with some of the basic switches. And just like the scene of a homicide, Dexter was gone without a trace. Comms were good and we were ready to run them up. The crew chiefs had done an incredible job, and this was actual war. They would probably got a commendation how quickly they got that airplane from a cold engine start to warm in 30 minutes. With the flick of a switch, we told the computers to pull up the ladders and close the hatch. One by one, we ran up the 4 General Electric F-118 turbofan engines. I was surprised to learn that the B-2 actually had 4 engines, because it looks like it only has 2 with the air intakes. Crew chiefs pulled the fire bottle and we were ready to taxi on time. And as if on cue, ground controllers in Whiteman Tower came to life. Death 2-3 cleared a taxi via Echo Foxtrot Alpha to runway 19er. Shredder pushed the throttles forward and did a quick brake check. The Black Beast lunged forward and jerked to a stop. We continued down the taxiway and quickly saw the other 2 B-2 Spirits already taxiing ahead of us. With little or no chatter on the radio, Death 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3 moved in silence towards the runway. We waited for the exact minute of our formation takeoff with minimum delay between aircraft. We held short of runway 19er and the other 2 B-2s in front of us rumbled down the runway. They jumped to the skies like a kite being pulled in a gusty wind. Then it was our turn. We released the brakes, pushed the throttle forward slightly, and taxied onto the runway. In our small windshield, I could see Death 2-2 just getting airborne and starting its left-hand turn. Shredder did a final checks for the instruments, and we went full throttle. We roared down the runway, not fast at first, but quickly gaining valuable airspeeds. Having nearly the same wingspan as 747, but only a third of the length, we quickly rotated off the ground. And the moment that we lifted our wheels off the ground, I became Spirit number 571, the 571st person to actually fly aboard a B-2 Spirit since its first flight almost 25 years ago on July 17, 1989. In that span, I became the 11th civilian to have had the honor of flying this aircraft. And only until recently, there had been more people in space than have actually flown a B-2. As we flew southwesterly heading, we broke through the clouds and I spotted the other 2 B-2s in front of us. Then it hit me that this was actually happening. After all these years of being persistent, I was witnessing something no one gets a chance to see. I looked out my windshield and saw 2 other B-2s in formation, ready to head off on a mission. 15% of the stealth bomber fleet was airborne that day, and we were on our way to do a formation refueling. As we passed through 15,000 feet and finally had a few moments to take a breath, Shredder turned to me and presented to me my very own Spirit coin. This particular coin was given only to those who have flown in the B-2, and the silver coins are for passengers while gold ones are for pilots. I was smiling ear to ear, not that you could see underneath the oxygen mask, but trust me, I was. But now it's time to get back to business. Lead called in on the air-to-air freak and had us check in. We were passing through waypoint 8, flight level 290 with a ground speed of 407 knots. 2 check, 2 3 check. We were approaching our first major checkpoint, waypoint 9, the trombone. It was a left 180-degree turn with 30 degrees angle of bank for the entire formation. That was the maximum angle of bank authorized for the B-2. We would start the turn early to make up some time if we needed, or we could delay and push it out to rendezvous with our tanker on 110 East. We stayed slightly high and to the left of depth 2-2, but was slightly high and to the left of depth 2-1, with about a 3-mile spread. Shredder then asked me if I wanted to take controls of the stick. He sensed my hesitation, but he reassured me that he'd be there to follow along if anything happened. I had dreamed of this moment to actually take 0.1 hours of flight time in the B-2, but once I was up there, I didn't know if I could actually do it. But I pressed on, took the stick, and I was surprised how easily it was to fly that aircraft. It must have been all that lift, because just the fact that there's no rudder is just weird. Shredder was busy handling air traffic control vectors around a large thunderstorm and an angry controller that was having a better day. It sounded like he needed a hug, so I put those 100 hours of private pilot time to good use and helped out the best I could. I shut up and flew the airplane. Shredder asked me to keep the flight, keep flying at flight level 260s and keep depth 2-2 at our 11 o'clock at 280 knots. Once I got the hang of the sensitive controls, flying her was a piece of cake. But soon later, after we hit the trombone, hoist 90 came up on frequency and Lee was trying to get a visual on them. Shredder and I had vectors from ATC where hoist should have been, but we had no joy. The other thing that added major complications to our flight was the giant storm cells from a series of tornadoes that passed through Indiana that very morning. Air traffic control had given death flight a block altitude of flight level 25 to 26, which normally is enough room to be safe, but with storm clouds and the potential of ice hidden inside them, we tried our best not to fly through them. But try as we might, we couldn't see hoist 90. Eventually, Lead spotted them off in the distance and beeline for the McGuire plane, but the damage was done. We had lost precious refueling time on the refueling track. Hoist 90 informed us that they'd be only able to refuel the first 2 B-2s before reaching the end of the refueling track, and my B-2 would only get 1 quick dry contact. Lucky for us, since we didn't fly in the plane that we were originally scheduled to fly in, we had a full load of fuel, so this was not a problem, and I was happy to take that opportunity. And to top it off, the boom mic was not working, so the boom commands would be routed through the pilots and then transmitted to our aircraft, which wasn't a big deal either because B-2 pilots constantly practice no radio contracts, using only the lights underneath the KC-10. At 274 knots at 26,000 feet, the 2 giant aircraft afforded an aerial ballet getting closer and closer. We wanted to try to go ahead and not pass the KC-10, but air traffic control notified us that we had traffic on a collision course and immediately ordered the KC-10 to do a right 360. Normally the KC-10 would follow a large racetrack pattern, but instead we slalomed around giant clouds. Unknown to ATC, a giant cumulonimbus cloud lay directly in our circle ahead of us. And even though Shredder exercised every pilot skill he can to keep the other aircraft in sight, once we started flying in and out of the tops of the clouds, the dark gray KC-10 was visible and then invisible again. So to back up our visual cues, we turned on the radar to avoid a nasty mid-air collision. Once we rolled out straight and level, Shredder easily moved in for a solid contact and nailed it on the first try. And because of a very awesome Master Sergeant from the 2nd Aerial Refueling Squadron sitting in the boom window, I was able to get this priceless shot of the B-2 being refueled by hoist 90. So that's me sitting in there somewhere. Alright, once we hit the end of the aerial refueling track, it was time to make our left turn to intersect waypoint 16 and start the conventional bomb run and take out the enemy radar targets in simulated mission plan. But, unfortunately for us, due to the last-minute aircraft swap, the B-2 was accidentally loaded with a distinguished visitor mission profile instead of the original conventional nuclear strike missions we had briefed. With 100 miles to go before reaching Whiteman and just over an hour of flight time left, Shredder made an executive decision to make sure I still got the full experience, and he punched in some random coordinates to make sure that we could simulate the arming of our B-83 variable yield nuclear gravity bombs. As mission commander sitting in the right seat, he had me enter the executive code from the President of the United States and then flip the weapons arm consent switch to our B-83 weapons. We slowed to 397 knots, the maximum airspeed we could fly with safely opening the bomb bay doors. And the computer took over and simulated the release of the nukes after calculating the optimal release time based off our altitude, airspeed, and distance to target. Somewhere below us, I'd like to think that there was a cow in a field that looked up and turned to instant steak. Then it was time to RTV. We checked in with RAPCON, and they gave us radar vectors for the ILS for runway 19 at Whiteman Air Force Base. We were third to land. As we turned base to final, we heard on the radio that Death 2-1 was having a faulty gear lock indicator light that had come on. They made several low approaches and had the folks in the tower and the supervisor of flying visually check to make sure that the gear looked down and safe. While it was a big distraction to me, Shredder was on the ball and got us down on the ground with a very, very stiff crosswind. The weather from the tornadoes over Indiana was still causing havoc over Whiteman. And the B-2 generates so much lift that as it enters ground effect, he has to really wrestle the aircraft down. We taxied back, Death 2-1 did another low flyby for a gear check, and the crashed trucks had rolled and positioned themselves along the runway. And by the time we reached our hard stance for our ERP, word had passed the Death 2-1 and made it on the ground safely, with no issues. As I exited the plane, Shredder stayed behind and waited for the next crew to come in and take over. Because just because our sortie was over, the night wasn't over for the Spirit of Mississippi. And on the ramp, Farmer, the OG of the 131st Bomb Wing, greeted me on the ramp to shake my hand and present me with his personal coin and a certificate honoring my flight of the B-2, which was one of my most treasured possessions at this point. We actually get a list of every other person who's flown the B-2, and what's kind of hard to read, but this right here is November of 2011, and of course this is 2014 of April. And what it basically shows is who's flown it, and on average, only about 4 or 5 pilots get to be mission qualified in a B-2 once every 6 months. So there's a long list of pilots, but then occasionally you get to see cool people like, well, me obviously. You've got commanders of AFCENT, Air Force Southern Command, and the likes who get a DV flight, so I think I'm in good company. Well, but then it was time to get back to business. The joyride was over, and it was time to actually put my money where my mouth was and camera up to the glass and take a few pictures. So what I'm going to do is quickly talk and run through a couple slides of what it was like to actually go through the air-to-air part of the briefing. So months and months once I found out that the flight was approved, 4 months before, we went ahead and you get assigned a pilot to have interactions with and say, hey, Shredder, who's my pilot, this is what I want to do. Can I do that? You go back and check with his people and be like, yeah, that's just not safe, we can't do that. So I send my laundry list, what I want, and what I usually do in my briefings is I'll come up with a mission objective. We'll go ahead and highlight how long the flight is, what the objectives are, notes, and what the profile is going to be. Then of course you meet over food and you talk about it with everybody else in the formation. You're like, hey guys, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And on average, for every 1 hour of flight time, we've briefed at least 6 to 8 hours on the ground or over the internet, back and forth on what we can do and what we can't do, so that no surprises in the air by the time we get there. Then it was time to actually have the briefing the morning of. So at 1100, we all got together in the 394th Squadron bar, and we went ahead and ran through the mission brief for everybody. So I'll be a little bit abbreviated, but I want to impress upon you the safety that goes into an air-to-air photo shoot and the complications, and we worked out every contingency so that when we're airborne, again, the first entire mission objective is be safe. And then, as you can see, well, after that it was to get awesome pictures. We have mission data here. I won't read everything, but we go ahead and put down as much information possible so everyone's on the same page. The T-38 is going to do a takeoff, rejoining the pattern with Death 2-3, execute low approach, go up to the MOA, the military operating area just above Whiteman Air Force Base, execute our photo profile, and return to base as a 3-ship and do a full stop. The players of this flight are the B-2, which is Death 2-3, Ribeye 1, which is one of the T-38s from the 394th Combat Training Squadron, and then Ribeye 2, which is the photo ship. So what we do is we go ahead and we go through the entire timeline here, all the way from minute by minute of when the B-2 takes off, The T-38s are stepping to the aircraft. When the B-2 comes back, when we go ahead and enter and we do a formation takeoff all the way through sunset and our scheduled land time. And we want to be able to land before civil twilight. Here's our mission data, and we have knock it off procedures just in case something doesn't feel right to anyone in the audience, or I'm sorry, in the planes. We go do that. And one of the big things that we had to watch out for was wake turbulence of the B-2. It's a giant aircraft, and the T-38 is not a giant aircraft. Emergency procedures and the overall weather briefing. And like I said, it continues and continues. So we go ahead and plan this out so there are no surprises and everybody is on the exact same page. Then it's time to go ahead and step to the T-38. So we grabbed our gear, went through, and everyone really knows that fuel doesn't make airplanes fly, paperwork apparently makes airplanes fly. So we filled out all the forms and finally jumped in the aircraft and went airborne. Started the taxi. This is my view from the back seat of a T-38, in case you've never seen it. I highly recommend it if you get a chance. Then it was time for ribeye flight to do a formation takeoff. I've never actually done a formation takeoff, so this was actually really cool. We rolled, and these guys were close. I swear I could have just reached out and just been like, high five, because this is awesome. But then we had our instructions we needed to make sure that we climbed into the MOA. Weather was an issue, so we wanted to find a hole because you wouldn't want to fly through a cloud because of the icing on a stubby wing of a T-38 isn't that great. But yeah, forget about that airplane. The cool thing is the streaks of light in the back. That's actually the holes in the clouds. So we found a hole, and these guys were having a blast. They pointed that pointy end and went straight up like a little missile. And then once we got airborne, you know, there's this B-2 hanging out over there. No big deal. Then we got down to business. So immediately we wanted to go ahead and do our formation photo shoots. I'm going to go ahead and save this one, but what I'm going to do is let you guys read the top there. We executed what's called a breakaway shot. The B-2 T-38 is basically going to form and break away from each other. This was the result of that particular shot. Break into shot. This was actually our most complicated shot, and I'm just going to take a moment and show you the picture right here, what it's supposed to look like. The first iteration did not go well. We actually almost had a mid-air collision. The B-2 doesn't have a very high visibility out of the window, and the T-38 itself, for whatever reason, we went ahead, we crossed streams, we rejoined, but my pilot ended up drifting instead of maintaining our heading. He looked at the map, went sideways, and next thing you know, I look out my window and I see a giant B-2 way closer than it should be. We executed an immediate left turn, went away, pulled up high, B-2 called to knock it off. Everyone go ahead, takes different vectors. I couldn't see the other T-38. I was freaking out, I'm not gonna lie. Luckily, nothing had happened, and we pressed on. Everyone reconvened, they decided that was we'll talk about it afterwards, and they still felt safe enough. Then came the T-38 breakaway shot, and I know we're running a little bit late on time, but I wanted to show you what it looks like when it doesn't work out. The shots are amazing that I got, and I don't want you to think that, you know, you only see these things, this guy's amazing, but this is something that, you know, you just can't plan on the ground until you're actually up there. And, you know, again, at $200,000 an hour, this is a very expensive photo shoot. So the T-38 breakaway shot is kind of what it seems right here. The B-2 strain level, T-38's right off his wing, and then all of a sudden T-38 just does a slow roll, and then because of the side profile of the T-38, there's very little lift, so it's just going to naturally drop off. But the problem was that he wasn't high enough when he started, and as he rolls, you can see towards the last series of shots, it just didn't look dynamic. I know you guys are very disappointed, and you would just be like, get out of here. But then we redid it, and it didn't turn out that bad. We did one called low and aft, which was to be able to get a bomb bay door shot. Very simple maneuver. B-2 goes straight, we go below. I look straight up, bomb bay doors open, and it's awesome. Then came what, for a photographer, is a little bit more challenging of a shot, a lag roll. For those of you that don't know what a lag roll is, basically you have an object right here. We would be here and do a roller coaster loop, up and over, and then land on the opposite side. And all the while, I'm upside down. So I'd start off looking up. By the time we get upside down, I'm looking down, and there's a B-2 below us that I have to keep an eye on, look through the viewfinder, make sure it's sharp, in focus, get the shot. The problem was I threw up right afterwards. That being said, it didn't stop me. We went ahead and executed it again because I was not going to let this opportunity that had been almost 6 years in the making go away. Not a bad shot. And then was the inverted selfie, because let's be honest, everyone wants to take a selfie. Problem was I wasn't really feeling good about going inverted again, so we just modified it, called an audible, and I got a selfie with me in a B-2. And then it was time to return to base. So we got formation shots. These are more pictures that I took along the way. Another selfie, you know? And here's us taking the landing back. Needless to say, I was a little excited. That's me in the back seat there. But it was a very, very draining experience. After the adrenaline wears off, most of you guys know on this side of the audience what it's like to fly a routine, and then afterwards you're just beyond exhausted. But then it was time for me to put my money where my mouth was. I got some great images, but I had to finally get them published. So one of the main sponsors of my sortie was Air Force Magazine. For those that don't know, it's the premier magazine of the Air Force. Most Air Force people subscribe to it, and it's got, I think, a 300,000 subscriber rate a month. So a really good audience, and one that the Air Force was happy to have a showcase in. So what I really love doing are photo essays. I want to be able to go to a base and tell a story, not just of an aircraft and a plane, but the people and the men and women who are behind the place, all over the place. So we got folks that, you know, work in maintenance, work in the radar control tower. You know, we give an opportunity to put them in the magazines instead of just the performers. Nothing against our performer friends, but you know, there's a lot of people on your support staff that don't get the recognition that they deserve. So to be able to, you know, highlight them, it gives me great honor to be able to tell their story. And that's the end of my presentation. Looks like we got a few minutes for Q&A, so thank you.